Hi there, it's Frank Spillers here, and welcome to today's web seminar on the topic of collaborative user interfaces. And this is the power of the collaborative user interface. Collaborative interfaces are really important because they're used in the most common experiences, from enterprise to web apps to mobile apps and in VR and AR as well. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to share this information with you is because I've been thinking about collaboration for a very long time. Back in the mid-90s, I started studying collaboration in virtual environments and in web communities online. And this formed the basis of my master's degree in collaborative virtual environments. But one of the things I realized at Experience Dynamics is that we do a lot of collaborative UIs. We just don't call them that, and I see a lot of collaborative UIs out in the world. And I bet you're working on one right now and you probably don't think about it in a collaboration framework. So let's look at today's agenda. So to me, collaboration is a way to differentiate. It's actually a requirement if you're working on something that's very workflow based, or where there are multiple users using the software. And so much software today has these attributes of social interfaces, social UI, social user experience, collaborative, in other words. So first of all, we're going to start by defining collaboration. And then we'll get into assessing how deep you need to go, based on your KPIs. We'll talk about social interfaces and collaboration in the context of emotion design, so how they overlap with emotion design. And then we'll talk about tapping into and activating and tapping into your users' social cognition, because that's really what it's all about, is how do you tap the social aspect of your customers or your users as they're interacting with your software. I love this quote from Paul Adams, who started social circles at Google, and then he went to Facebook and basically created similar type of groups and that kind of thing. And the idea was that you would group your contacts, and it's a really great idea. I don't know if it saw the light of day fully with Google Plus, and I don't know if it actually turned into much on Facebook either. But the idea of grouping and creating social circles was just a genius idea. So Paul Adams said that we're going to need to learn how to create these social features, whether we like it or not. And for Paul Adams, it's like he mentioned that this isn't a fad, that this is something that is just fundamental. To think about the internet over the last 25 years or so, 20 years, let's say, that we've gone from just one person view to this collaborative, rich structure, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's you're in a doctor's office, or you're using a web application for productivity and efficiency in an environment. Well, why do you think Paul Adams said this? Why do you think he feels it's so important? So I think the evolution is the obvious thing. Let's talk about why that may be, and we'll start by looking at some collaborative interfaces. So has anybody ever used the Friends Nearby feature in one of their apps? A lot of apps have it, and I don't know anybody that uses this. This is literally me at an airport trying to figure out if my flight is going to take off. And I look at my app. So first of all, Facebook is telling me that my friends are nearby. I'm not really sure how I would even think about using this feature. what is the context of locating your friends nearby? You know, it's as if this is almost like the reason I show this, and I want to show you, like, start off with what collaborative interfaces don't look like, because I think it's useful just for a second, and then I have many examples of what they do look like. Um, but this sort of characterizes the struggle point of where we're at with defining collaborative or social user experience. It's a bolt-on, like cobbled-on thing, and we don't know what to do with it, you know, as users. And I think designers the same. You know, it's like, what is the context that you would seek a user nearby? Has anybody actually used this feature that's on the call today? If you have, can you chat and let me know? So I'm looking at for my flight, if it's, and I look down at this app that I use, which is actually a great app. You know, you put in your airline and it tells you if it tells you if your flight is late. I mean, so what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Is that it's really important to ask that primary question when you approach user experience projects. What is the problem we're trying to solve? And there's our nearby, allow users to discover you. I'm not really sure why you would let someone discover your location, and then there's internet sharing in this app as well, and I'm not really sure why you would do that either. I haven't actually found a way to do that at all. So somebody's saying, Brad's saying, used Foursquare once to make a point that it was not meaningfully implemented. Okay, so Foursquare doing the same kind of thing, sure. Thanks for sharing. And you know, this strikes me as a missed opportunity. I mean, it's easy to criticize, right? It's easy to say, well, this is ridiculous, and look at, you know, it's silly, and you know, but to me, it's a missed opportunity that to create a social experience and to differentiate with this app. I mean, think about what do you think they could have done differently? So you can see they're adding sprinkles of, you know, social experience and collaboration. But what's the thing that they may have done differently? What do you think? Let's open this up to a question for you all. Get your brains working here on Tuesday morning or afternoon, as if you're in a different time zone. I mean, think about, like, so we'll talk about emotion today, but think about the emotion here is basically, am I going to miss my flight? I mean, this is the app that tells you that your flight is late or delayed before the airline tells you. That's the emotional value of using this app. So sometimes there's that gray area where you're not really sure. The airline has kind of announced, in America they do this this game where they cancel your flight, but they sort of slowly put you to death. they announce it and announce it and announce it, and then finally you it gets canceled. And that's happened to me a zillion times. It seems to be like a technique the airlines use, but it's actually really helpful, especially if you have your mileage you know, points. You can go into a lounge and get them to re-engineer your flight, you know, change it and put you on a different flight, and you can actually get home maybe on time. You know, I've had that happen to me, and by apps like this where I've had the tip off from the app, you know, and then gone to the lounge, and then so it's information and it's the tip off, you know, and it's maybe other users know something about this flight that you don't know. Maybe somebody overheard somebody, you know, because it's all about where you are. If you're near the desk, if maybe there's a nice flight attendant that or a, you know, crew member that says something, you know, there's just so many opportunities to share, you know, just sharing a mood, what you think about this, you know, how long have you been waiting, you know, maybe somebody shows up from a Tokyo flight or a LA flight, and how long have you been waiting, and what have they been jerking you around, you know, in other words, what's your confidence level that this flight is only 10 or 20, it's more like 30 or 60 minutes delayed, right? I mean, so there's the lost opportunity. Like for me, I'm like, geez, you know what? This other stuff here, it's an interesting stab at it, but it's totally off. And that's one of my biggest criticisms of, you know, or problems with social collaborative experiences is they miss the mark. And I hope in this seminar that you get an understanding of why apps miss the mark and that you can apply that to your own design efforts, because that's really what I want to leave you with. So you have collaboration in popular fitness apps, and they're integrated into the phone. And this is a Jawbone. The duals. I think from our studies with fitness trackers, we did a very large-scale global study this year with fitness trackers with both Jawbone and Fitbit, and I think it's something like 20 to 30%, let's say 15 to 30% of users actually use this social feature. These apps try and put in other features, like I think I was using my Jawbone for a year before I realized that there was a link at the bottom of the app, even though I'm looking at it daily, and there was a link that said, uh, share this result or something, and I thought, share it with who? What is that? So explaining what this stuff is really important. The motivation. So reinforcing it. We've done comparative studies of other fitness apps, and that was actually published in a paper you could find online. And we found that a lot of these apps just sort of cobble this stuff in and they don't tell you what it is. So another example of collaboration is just Dropbox has added collaborative note-taking. They're trying to stay current with their other competitors, and it's pretty good. We just recently did a huge collaboration project with a client exclusively using Dropbox this summer. I think they just maybe a week after they launched the feature, and it just sort of fell into our lap, and we actually couldn't get that client to use Slack, which we'll see an example of. Slack is a very, very popular collaboration app. There were some gaps in the Dropbox experience, but overall it did the trick. And it was just things like having more flexibility around what you could do with comments, so going deeper into the collaborative experience. This is a collaborative whiteboard it's actually Skype. I think this is a Skype prototype of blending. Microsoft will be blending augmented reality with Skype. This is Microsoft's HoloLens, where Microsoft is saying that their key killer app here for this, they're launching into a business-to-business context with this HoloLens product. Set of goggles that you then visualize these holograms, and they call it mixed reality. And they say that their key area is collaboration. So back to traditional old, web pages, you have, of course, the rise of the wall. The social intranet systems like Jive. One of our clients. Having the wall, the Facebook type wall that appears everywhere. This is very mainstream in CRM software and intranet software. And there it is in Salesforce. This is Chatter in Salesforce. Chatter is one of these retention things for Salesforce that they didn't just cobble it in there. They put it in there as a way to retain users, because social user experiences and collaborative interfaces actually add to a retention type of metric. And there are many types of apps. This is one called Figma that uses a collaborative, very rich collaborative interface to provide feedback on designs. So there are actually many systems out there that many of you use, I know, InVision, whatever it may be, to provide collaborative design feedback. But collaboration also extends to healthcare. This is Practice Fusion, and a patient record, for example, is a highly collaborative type of environment. It's a rich informational space, and being able to, in this case, send a referral directly from the software is is actually huge. Because we've found with our studies in healthcare that the vendor softwares that don't allow this and the intense IT integration that needs to occur creates breaks. It creates broken workflow, and that's a key to your opportunities for collaborative software in B2B contexts, or an efficiency, productivity, office type of context is broken workflow or broken tasks. And then if you think of them as being conducted by or having social effects, because they do, pretty much all business-to-business software has some type of effect, even down to IPO handling. I did some work a few years ago for a financial industry regulatory authority, and the IPO software there was very clear handoffs and many opportunities to mess up on policy, on stated policy of when an IPO would be reviewed. They get like 90 days, and then it's 60 days, and then 30 days where they have to give an answer back to the lawyer that's handling the IPO. And so, I'm sitting there at the desk, and this has happened to me in healthcare, and in this case, at Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and the guy's got above his desk, he's got a piece of paper that says 30, 60, 90, and I was like, why do you have that above your desk? Because everybody knows that this is like the rule. And he goes, well, I forget, and I'm like, well, and I'm thinking to myself, why is that not in the software? That this, time-based, so this is a temporal kind of thing, so it's a time-based thing that will trigger workflow to the next user, and it wasn't there. There are some very interesting examples in the research world. I'll show you one of my favorites that I discovered on an actual field study from the field. But this is a social site that for researchers, and they sort of scoop in all your research papers and then present them to you. Then they send you emails, and email is not a trivial discussion in this scope of collaborative interfaces. Email is the central way that it's one of those triggers that tells you, I'm sure if you haven't noticed this, then maybe you're not on Facebook or other apps, but the reason why you use Facebook is because of those annoying emails that they keep sending you saying that somebody's posted something or there's something on your wall, and so email becomes really key. In this site, they send you emails telling you that people have been following your stuff, or that you've had 25 reads last week, and you're trending and things like that. And then you see it with sites like Airbnb. So these are all collaborative interfaces. This is all social user experience, in terms of tapping social behavior, shared experience, shared workflow, shared information. That's all we're talking about here, is how do you maximize the sharing of information so that you provide benefit to your user. Traveling with friends, send them the itinerary with Airbnb. And of course, the classic Amazon, others also bought. This stuff is so furniture level, in the room, that we don't even consider it an example of collaborative interfaces anymore. But this is kind of where it began in e-commerce. And this is, I think Amazon put this out in 1998, 7, 8, really early on. Another example here from a system, it's called Share Square, that allows for whiteboarding. It's in beta right now with webcams, and this effort to create rich collaborative social spaces is something that's been going on for close to 30 years really, but let's just say 15, 20 years. And it's kind of going on, it's kind of bubbling in the background of the internet, I think. Probably in your projects too, I'm sure, like I said, many of you are probably developing collaborative interfaces, but don't consider it to be that. You don't consider it to be the supporting of shared workflow. And I think the relevancy of this webinar and this conversation is that we're moving into a space where this becomes like the defining area of user experience. with virtual reality and augmented reality. So things like payment systems, where the integration of SMS or the notifications and the smart alerting, right? So notifications can just be noise, as Apple has shown us. It can just be a bunch of noise, but if they're relevant and contextual and in the moment, they're decent. So here's where we're headed. So Microsoft is integrating augmented reality and virtual reality into their operating system. It's going right into there for support. They're also bringing the cost of these headsets, or at least they're working on a VR headset and bringing it down to like $200, $150, something like that. So to me, the exciting thing about this is the killer app here is collaboration. It's gaming is where we are now with it, I guess, and the HoloLens developers develop apps with collaboration in mind, though few of them are aware that there's a whole body of methodology and process in user experience related to collaboration. So developing a collaborative experience without understanding collaborative UX and the nuances of it is to me a little bit risky. So we'll see a lot more mistakes. I think the opportunities are really rich. This is Microsoft's vision for integrating Skype with the HoloLens, so that you're able to virtually be there and write on things and drop holograms here and there. This is an example of this holoportation system from Microsoft Research Labs, and this is actually a working thing. It's not that far out. It's completely working proof of concept technology. This is somebody else beaming into a living room, basically, and then being able to manipulate that object and being able to enhance work through presence. I think that's the big defining thing, that when you get into these bleeding edge high tech technologies of VR, ARs, then you're talking about having presence with your collaboration, which is a very powerful thing. But let's come back down to earth for a minute, if we would. And for me, the issue here is what's relevant to you. What's your KPI for collaboration? Is it social networking, where trust is an issue? Is it user engagement and retention, where adoption and emotion plays into engagement? There are a lot of opportunities. We saw the simple little silly one from the airline, from the flight one, as an opportunity, sort of making it more relevant. And other KPIs, customer conversion. Is it the credibility process? Is it purchase decision? Amazon nailed that with their example. Is it brand experience? If you're a startup, it's definitely differentiation, and you'll see that with many of the mobile apps on the market today, providing that unique value by providing that collaboration. Is it ease of use or ease of learning? Is it this very basic usability issue of helping users traverse your content and navigate your site and see what they should be seeing? If you take the basic understanding is that users don't really know if they're looking at the right thing or if they should be where you want them to be, in terms of the flow of their experience, their journey, if you will. And so knowing can be aided by social and collaborative effects. So this is where social interfaces, collaboration, and emotion overlap. We always look for social effects and emotional effects in our field studies. And, one of the most important things, I think, in terms of, a lot of people ask me, well, where do you start with this? How do you discover these, what's right for your collaborative interface? How do you know how to get the information, to help you inspire a design feature or process that would be useful to your users? And the key is really to conduct field studies. You can't easily make this stuff up. You know, you can't just sit in your office and sort of try and empathize. You know, it's so important to observe and to contextualize your experience. I've seen this over and over again, and I've tried this. I'm telling you this because I've tried it. If this was easy to just dream up and say, hey, I can figure out where a user you know, might need some social support or some collaboration. Uh, it's very hard to do that without actually being in that environment and observing. And to me, it's really an issue of accuracy. You know, I'm very, very clear that you can burn somebody out or blow somebody out with the wrong implementation of a collaborative interface. You know, and you see that all over the place. You know, it's usually find your friends nearby, or here's a wall, here's what's happening, and you're like, you don't care. It's, you know, Skype gives you that. Skype will give you like things that your friends are posting, or they have an entire area of their screen dedicated, and it's completely useless. It's just complete garbage. Doesn't have any meaning at all. You know, it's like a cobbled on thing. So the key is really coordination. You know, this is a hint that you need a collaborative interface. If there's coordination of tasks or work in terms of workflow that you're mapping, if you're, I know there's some business analysts on this call, um, if you're identifying and observing coordination, that's a key, you know, and then you just need to look for the social effects, what social behaviors or group effects are surrounding this action. And emotional effects include, you know, what makes a task compelling. They may also be the need, you know, such as urgency. You know, urgency can create a lot of interesting emotion, such as, did I get it right? Is this the right thing? Did I submit the IPO correctly? You know, in the case I was just sharing. You know, so it's sort of like the bell going off, the alarm going off. You know, these two things are interrelated, social and emotional effects. And there's that Skype one I was telling you about. So I just have this, and look how much real estate that takes up. And you know, it just cupcakes, jam, and floss from Olaf in China. Um, improving, I like this one, improving, like, wow, that so much real estate, and just such a wasted opportunity for such a richly social app that Skype is. You know, that just imagine the possibilities of what you could do to make Skype more socially intelligent, you know, to make it a richer collaborative space. And Microsoft is dreaming of those things with augmented reality. I think even at the desktop level, there are many, many opportunities to provide that, you know, to provide that level. And I'll give you a very simple one that I've been thinking about for a few years with related to Skype. Is many business people use this with remote teams and, you know, across the globe. And if you knew that it was 2 a.m., for example, this guy in China, Olaf, he's somebody who attended one of my trainings online, and it was like a 3 day two-day training, I think. And this guy was just a trooper, and he was staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. To learn this stuff. And you know, when someone goes really quiet and it's like 2 a.m., it might be a good reminder for you to know that their time zone, you know, so just having a little moon next to them, or showing that you don't know that. You know, you have to do the mental empathy calculation in your mind that's there. I wanted to share with you, this is a case study from an insurance company that we worked with, that we designed. This is a discussion area, and we didn't. So for many of you, it may look like a forum, but we sort of didn't want it to feel like a forum, because forums can be tired, and you know. So we wanted it to just be this open, you know, search and submit a question. We wanted it to also be easy to implement as well. So we didn't want it to be too complex and too intense for an implementation standpoint. But this is just a very simple example in an industry as you know, say conservative as insurance, where you can bring aspects of collaborative and social features to it. Now, throughout the rest of this web application, there are also other social and collaborative features as well. This is a note from the field from a healthcare study that we did, and we found that there were iPads and tablets in the doctor's offices, but understanding how they were using them. So the note here is they're using them to review, not doing data entry as much. One of the things with the many clinics who have the iPads that don't use them is because Apple is completely blind to the notion that a iPad would be used by more than one person. Yet every statistic from when iPads started coming out in 2008, 9, 10, whenever it was it 10, 11, whenever iPads started coming out, they showed that consumers used them at the home, and they shared, at home on the couch, and they shared them, so it was a shared experience. And then in business settings like this, where there are rules, for example, that a doctor's access of permission could not be accessed by somebody else. So it's just a fundamental miss, and probably Apple's intention was to sell one iPad per person, so the business interest may be competing with that. But what a miss, and this is a picture from we were looking at care collaboration, which is a thing with the healthcare system in the United States, something called patient-centered medical home, which is where everyone is sort of collaborating to provide a richer patient experience. And this in this office, they expected that to be part of their EMR, their medical record software. It's very interesting what that expectation was, and it didn't have it, by the way. So how do you activate and tap into your user's social cognition in the remaining few minutes? So the first one is matching real-world social behavior. That's really important to get the match. This is a wonderful example of how that was done here by Ellen DeGeneres. It's an app called Heads Up. If you haven't played it, you should. You need some friends to do it, and it's just a genius way to bring the technology into already existing paradigm of sort of card games, question answer, really clever, and then you lift up the phone up and down on your head. And of course, there's the apps that maybe somebody used to get to work today or last night to get to the movies or something like that. This is actually a concept of Lyft that is bringing in collaboration. So it's bringing in that's the lower strip at the bottom with other users. These apps have interesting social effects from a lack of understanding of collaboration, particularly Uber. Uber last year spent a lot of money redesigning their logo, and I think they're just about to bring in a new design, or maybe it's out. I think it's actually out in the last month or so, in the last few weeks. And I think the report that I've heard is that they still haven't fixed the pin issue. So where you drop the pin and where the driver picks you up is really, really relevant to the overall value of convenience and having the app to know when the driver's coming and all these kinds of things that these apps, they're wonderful features. But boy, can you really, I've had angry drivers, that because the pin accidentally dropped in the wrong place, and I had some Uber drivers in Boston teach me how to use the pin. It has to be blue, and then because sometimes your finger moves across and basically you accidentally drop it in the wrong place. Happens all the time. I would say close to 80% of the time using Uber's app. So the second thing is aligning with relevant social triggers. One of my favorite apps. So aligning with relevant social triggers. The social trigger here is avoiding the cops, basically, with Waze. Waze is just a wonderful social collaborative app, and these are other users, and you can report incidents on the road. But the main thing, I think, is the cops, and that's the emotional thing. That's, if there's one thing to notice from Waze, it's that they found the emotional thing, which is avoid the cops for speeding, basically. you know, that and then of course reporting accidents and so forth. And they've gamified it. You get points, and gamification has a huge role in all this in collaborative interfaces. This is from Oculus, from their toy box concept, and so this is a collaborative, you know, sharing objects, problem solving with Oculus. And bear in mind that the Oculus just earlier this year, announced a social VR team. So they actually hired people specifically to work on the social aspects of their VR offering of the Oculus Rift. And so that's worth noting. And they're backed by Facebook as well. So the third tip here is to support social interactions by design. You know, by design. This is an interesting. This is sort of a portal that is called My Hub, and it's where you can look at colleagues' publications. This is like for researchers, and you can kind of scan and look at other people's bookshelves, and it's a great little community site that was organically built by a professor. And then there's the app QuizUp, which, you know, that the social triggers, you're online, you're playing this app. It's a great little app. It was very popular a few years ago, and you play against another player. You literally are you know, racing against them, and it adds that element of competition, but it's really the social effect that you get from it. Of course, there's other things, triggers like send your ETA or cancel the ride, you know, while if you've selected that Uber driver, that Lyft driver, and they haven't come. So there are little features you can call the person, but they haven't thought of this in an international context. Many Uber users drive or you know, use the Uber service internationally, for example, and they have your local phone number. So if you try and call that Uber driver in London or Paris, wherever you are, you can't do it, and so it creates this tension if they don't know where you are, and you don't, where are they, and what's happening, and it's back to your US. So a lot of these, you really see this sort of lens of, you know, ethnocentrism, really, that even though these companies are global, they're not thinking about these aspects of social global, you know, the globalization or localization user experience. There's Airbnb again with their showing off your great taste. And a great example of a collaborative interface from Asana. Asana is a project management tool that allows you to collaborate. Of course, there's Slack. You know, we can talk about collaboration without mentioning Slack. Very, very popular. Helps with productivity. Helps you sort of keep organizations threaded. And then finally, you know, VR. That we're moving into these social spaces where VR is going to bring us much closer together. So to leave you with a final thought, why is collaboration not approached in UX, like, you know, and why is it not even acknowledged? And many of these examples I've just shown you, you use these apps and you don't think of them as social or collaborative interfaces. Maybe you do, but I think it's because you know, we've confused our business level of competition and also our cultural tendency to design for individuals as opposed to designing for groups. You know, and I think this is really the issue. In fact, it turns out that we have evolved our strength, you know, from an evolutionary capacity has been based on cooperation. And so there's a lot in that from a design standpoint that you can tap into, and I hope I've given you some inspiration and some examples of how to do that. Let's take some questions here, and if you need to jump, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on a future webinar, I hope. And yeah, so Brad was saying, why isn't there a VoIP direct connect to the driver in the Uber app? Yeah, really. You know, it's interesting, speaking of the Oculus social VR team, and this is a picture from Oculus. That's what the thumbs up is all about. I think keep the bosses happy, right? Is they're adding VoIP. I was at a conference earlier this year, and Oculus is adding voice over IP to their VR experience. So yeah, I think we'll see more of that. I think it's not trivial to deliver a nice clean VoIP service, I think is how I would answer that. I think it's more of a technical thing, but any other comments or questions here as we wrap? And there's my email if you'd like to drop a line. If you feel like someone else should see this presentation, I'm going to be rerunning it in a few weeks, I think possibly in January. So stay tuned for that. I'll drop you an email with and also with the notes here for this one. So thanks again. I'll just stay on the line if there are any comments or questions here